My in-laws had 4 children in 5 years. So as you can imagine, their dinner table conversation was pretty lively. As the kids got older, the conversation got rowdier. Every so often, someone would bring up something sexual or scatological to keep that kind of talk to a minimum. The parents implemented the Sarché family rule. Anytime a kid brought up something like that, someone could invoke the Sarché family rule, and that kid would have to explain in detail what they were talking about. Out of sheer embarrassment, the kids stopped bringing up some things that maybe are left better away from the dinner table. My husband and I have 2 children in 3 years. Our dinner table conversation is pretty lively, and we also have the Sarché family rule, though ours is a little bit different. Every so often, someone brings up something sexual or scatological, but in our family, it's not usually one of the kids. It's usually me. Talking about things that make other people uncomfortable is not embarrassing for me at all. In fact, I live for it. I've always been good at talking about the hard stuff. I was an AIDS educator in college. I was a peer counselor. When my friends were worried about having an STD or being pregnant, they turned to me for help. When my lifelong friend, Michelle, was diagnosed with a glioblastoma, the brain tumor that John McCain had, I realized that my comfort in talking about hard stuff was really pretty unusual. Glioblastoma is terminal, but it was really difficult for everyone to acknowledge that with Michelle. The people who loved her didn't want to make her feel worse, and she didn't want to make them feel worse. So everyone avoided talking about her illness and the fact that she would die. Instead, they told her that she was young and strong and that she would beat the disease. I handled things very differently. I said, I can go with you into the hard stuff. You don't have to tell me everything is going to be okay. And I don't have to tell you everything is going to be okay. We both know it's not going to be okay. We were relieved to talk about the elephant in the room. When she died, about 18 months after her diagnosis, I was and am still so grateful that we had those conversations. They brought us much closer, and they helped me to accept her death with fewer regrets. I didn't know it then, but my experience with Michelle set me on the path to my perfect career, my life's work, as director of pre-planning at Feldman Mortuary in Denver, Colorado. Before I heard about this opportunity, I didn't know anything about pre-need. I didn't know it existed, and I didn't really know much about funerals at all. But when I heard about the job, it was like a lightning bolt hit, and I knew it was exactly the job for me and what I was supposed to be doing. Before I got there, Feldman's really had a very passive pre-need program. I blazed my own trail and created the entire pre-need program from scratch. Although there are so many people who do pre-need sales, I have not come across anyone who does it the way that I do it. First, I thought about the niche that Feldman Mortuary serves. We've been serving the Jewish community for almost 85 years. To figure out who would want to use Feldman's service, I partnered with organizations that also serve the Jewish community to create a series called Before the Morning, MOURNING. It's been hugely successful, and I've been following the same recipe for almost 10 years. In the decade I've been doing this series, I have never presented directly about prearranged funeral planning. Instead, I facilitate workshops like Dying to Know, like The Gift of Your Presence, like Being Mortal. I do all I can to help people to understand that talking about death won't kill them. When they meet me at these events, they get comfortable with the idea of funeral or memorial service planning, and they understand that I am a safe person to help them to have the hard conversations. In our society, we're not supposed to talk about death. It's morbid, it's taboo, it's in bad taste. No one dies. Instead, we whisper that they passed away or even just passed. It reminds me of how we used to approach sex. A generation or so ago, we would teach children about their bodies using euphemisms. We would talk about their pee-pee, their wee-wee, their hoo-ha. The euphemisms made the grown-ups feel a little more comfortable. But ultimately, they made our kids think that their body parts are shameful and weird. Our aversion to talking about death in a straightforward way also reinforces the idea that we can't or shouldn't talk about something that is so fundamental. Language is powerful. It makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up when I hear my coworkers talk in that whispery voice about your loved one who passed. I'm really trying to teach them to use the correct language too. Though I absolutely believe that prearranged funeral planning is a gift to families, the real reason I do this work is to help people be less afraid of death. All of the presentations I do, and I do a lot of them, are focused on learning about death, dealing with grief, answering the questions that everyone has. So many times someone at a presentation or in a pre-need appointment will say, I have the weirdest question. The questions are never weird. It's just that they think they are weird for having questions and thinking about death at all. Talking helps us to understand what really happens. It helps us to normalize the experience and feel part of a community, less isolated and alone. And it helps others to share their experiences and their questions as well. My favorite part of a pre-need appointment is when we've made all this decisions, signed all the paperwork. Almost always, my clients will lean back in their chair, take a deep breath and say, that was so much easier than I thought. And at the time of the death, their loved ones are so grateful that they had this plan to fall back on. They didn't have to make decisions on the worst day of their life. They're able to avoid so much chaos and dysfunction. And the fact that they don't have to be preoccupied with the busyness of making plans allows them to really feel their emotions, which is the key to a healthy and healing bereavement. A few years ago, I helped a wonderful couple, Ernie and Rita, to put their funeral plans in place. Ernie is hilarious, and he talked about how happy he is to have everything decided. The only thing we don't know is the date. Recently, his wife Rita was in the hospital, and on the day before she was supposed to come home, she died. Her family was completely shocked. When they came to the funeral home, I asked them where they'd like to sit while we waited for a few other family members to arrive. Do they want to stay here, go upstairs? Their daughter said, "It's too many choices. I really can't handle making any decisions right now." Can you imagine what it would have been like for her if she had to choose the casket, figure out about flowers, know who was going to do the service, create the obituary? Thank God her parents had given her this gift and put a plan in place for exactly this moment. Illness is often part of life, and death always is. We have to stop doing so much to protect ourselves and our kids from that reality. How many times have you heard of a parent who finds the goldfish floating at the top of the bowl, and they immediately run out to get an identical replacement because God forbid their child should know that Nemo died? What if instead of doing that, they created a ritual to help their child to acknowledge death and to deal with the grief and practice feeling what grief is? Most of us know almost nothing about grief. And because we never talk about it, we really expect it to look like what we learned in 9th grade psychology. I've got denial now. Oh, now I'm bargaining. Ooh, I'm angry. That must mean I'm almost done. What happens when we experience grief and really find out that it is not a linear process? And it doesn't have an end point. Most of us believe that we are doing it wrong. My client, Diane, called looking for help with her grief. Her mother died less than a year ago. She's been judging herself and being judged by others because every time her mom's name comes up, she cries. When she shared that with me, I said, it sounds to me like she's grieving just fine. Grief is like the ocean. There are big waves at first, and they're coming fast and furiously, and they're washing over us, making us feel like we might drown. Eventually, the waves get a little smaller, they get further apart. We figure out how to hold our breath when they wash over. And sometimes they come fast and furious again, and we're smacked in the face by them and knocked over again. And there's no timetable for that. So many people are scared that if they talk about illness and death, that they'll bring it on. My client Joanne really wanted her parents to put funeral plans in place. She called me to talk about it and was sharing that though she wanted to, she was afraid to bring it up. Because if she did, she thought her parents would think she wanted them to die. I hear that all the time, and I imagine you do too. I told her that planning does not make anything happen, and I encouraged her to try. When she did, her mother was so grateful. It turns out that Mom had also wanted to put plans in place, but she was afraid to bring it up with her daughter because she thought it would scare her. Even though I have always easily talked about hard stuff, for a long time, I had trouble bringing it up with people who feel differently. I was terrified to talk to most people about funeral and memorial service planning. I thought that if I did, they would think that I think they're going to die. Well, 10 years into this work, I embrace the fact that I do think they're going to die, and I'm right. By doing this work, I am teaching people to have these hard conversations. Though they feel very awkward at first, the more they do it, the easier it is. And they're teaching other people to have these hard conversations as well. I hope that when they have these deep and meaningful conversations, when they inevitably have to face the illness and death of someone they love, they'll be able to do it with fewer regrets. What I have learned is that things are much scarier in the dark, and it's up to all of us to turn on the lights for people and help them to understand that they're stronger and braver than they thought. Thank you.